Hi, Jonah.
Hey, Bob.
How you doing?
Good. How are you?
I cannot complain. Let me introduce us. I'm Robert Wright. This is The Wright Show on Meaning of Life TV. You are Jonah Goldberg, senior editor and columnist at National Review, author of the mega bestseller Liberal Fascism, and then another book that also endeared you to liberals called The Tyranny of Clichés, How Liberals Cheat in the War of Ideas, which explains why they so often win, I guess.
It's
cheating.
Often.
They're cheating. So thank you for taking the time, Jonah.
My pleasure.
I think I warned you that what we're going to talk about is the meaning of life.
Yes.
So, for starters, does your life have meaning?
Sure. I think all life has meaning. I don't know. This is so fraught with danger of becoming sort of dorm room stuff, right? But yes, I think my life has meaning. I think your life has meaning. I think
that would be a feature, not a bug, if it became dorm room stuff. We welcome that. And you think mine does too. So that's
I do.
You think all life has meaning. That's good.
Well, let's put it as all human life has meaning, and I think you can have a hierarchy of meaning when it comes to animal life. But yeah, and I have theories about the values of different animal lives. And
I want to talk about dogs before this conversation is over, because I know you and I share a certain affection for dogs.
We do indeed.
But to get back to humans briefly, is it possible to say what kinds of things give your life meaning? Dogs would be one, probably.
Dogs would be one. I mean, I'm fairly persuaded by people like Arthur Brooks, who's my boss here. That's actually where I'm sitting at the American Enterprise.
I recommend being persuaded by bosses. This is a sound career strategy.
I haven't always been, but in the case of Arthur, he makes the case that, the places where we get most happiness, which is obviously different than meaning, are faith, family, friends, experiences, and that sense of earned success. And I think, if you were doing a Venn diagram with meaning, there would be considerable but not total overlap there with those things. I think, it's very difficult to sort of quantify what gives my life meaning, except for things that fall into basically those categories.
Mm-hmm. Well, let's start at the beginning.
Okay.
Faith, are you religious or spiritual but not religious, or what?
Well, I don't talk very much about my religion. I still consider myself Jewish. I do believe in transcendence or God, but I am a very, very bad and non-observant Jew. I like to think that at some point, the whole point of deathbed conversions is to, at least, for a lot of people, is to buy your way into heaven, and that really isn't an option with Judaism. But I do like to think that at some point I will come back to my faith a little bit more. But I'm not an atheist. Maybe on my darkest days I'm agnostic. But I do believe that there is a large and greater meaning out there than what we can impose or discern simply through our lived experiences and all that.
So there's a transcendent source of meaning.
Yeah, there is transcendence out there. I think there's just a hell of a lot more going on out there than the explanations you hear from atheists.
Mm-hmm. Now, does that mean you believe there's a higher purpose? I mean, when you're believing in God, I guess you do. But is even when you're having your doubts, do you believe that in some sense there's a higher purpose?
Yeah. Look, I don't believe that we are that we live in a cold and heartless, indifferent universe where, what was it? Can't remember the name of the guy. Forget it. Yeah, I don't believe that there is no meaning outside of us that renders all concepts indistinguishable and equally worthless. I think that you can never attain the perfect, but the conception of the perfect is the ideal by which we have standards of good and bad. And I believe, that our ideals have been worked out through a Hayekian or just a sort of philosophical process of trial and error and deliberation, and we have imperfect but pretty good ideas about what right and wrong are, about what valuable or trivial things are. And part of the meaning of life, I think, is the process by which you discover those things on a personal basis.
Mm-hmm. So as we kind of work out ideas about right and wrong, as the human species does, you think it's moving towards something that was in some sense kind of out there all along, something out there to approach? Yes.
I don't think it's entirely a social construct. I'm not going to get into the position of trying to defend, great natural law theorists and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, I think that there is something beyond me, some external perspective beyond me, by which we can judge basic concepts of right and wrong. And that, at the very least, I think society does a lot better when we operate as if those concepts of right and wrong exist outside of ourselves. I mean, that was one of the great cons of the American Revolution, or one of the most brilliant insights of the American Revolution, is that it's not self-evident that our rights come from God and that we're all created equal. It's actually a very contestable and contentious argument. And what they did was they short-circuited all of that by just simply asserting that it was self-evident. And I think that's a good thing. And I think society is a healthy one that takes those things as a self-evident proposition, rather than trying to, through brute reason, come up with arguments about who's more equal than others and all that kind of thing.
And the same would hold for the idea that there's moral truth. There's value in asserting it, and that it's kind of out there, however dimly we perceive it and however slowly we move toward it, but there's something out there to try to align ourselves with.
I think so. Sure.
Okay. So what came after faith in your list? Faith, family?
Family, yeah.
So you're a family aficionado.
I am quite devoted to my own family. I like family. I only have one kid. Wish I had more. Didn't work out that way. But
how old is your kid?
My kid is 12.
That's a pretty good age.
Yeah, it's got its pluses and minuses.
Male or female? That will determine whether your experience gets worse or better from here on out.
Female.
Oh, I've got bad news.
Yeah, I know. I can see it sort of lurking on the horizon. But although I got to say, she gets a little bit from me and a little bit of her mom. She's got a bad nostalgia problem in that she just doesn't want to grow up. And she's got a very...
Oh, I remember that.
Yeah, and it's a very rational position. I mean, she was reluctant to have a 10th birthday party because her attitude was, in effect, single digits have been really good for me, and it all goes downhill once you hit the double digits. And she's kind of right. So
she is wise beyond her years.
Yeah.
Now, I remember getting sad because Christmas was not as exciting as it had been. It was getting easier to sleep on Christmas Eve, and I remember telling my mom that and her reassuring me that I'd have some fun this Christmas. But yeah, it's tough. It's tough growing up.
It is. And also, Christmas and those kinds of things are less fun for the parents, too, once the kids get to be a certain age.
Oh, totally. It's, there's this age where, as a parent, you quit videotaping things.
Right.
It's like no child's life in America has ever been documented on video beyond the age of, like, 15 or something, if that.
Well, it's funny. There's a corollary to that, because my wife is one of 9 kids, and there are a million pictures of, like, the firstborn kid, 500,000 pictures of the second-born kid. And
nine siblings? Or 8 siblings?
8 siblings. And by the time you get to the little kids, there are very few pictures of the parents with the kids at all.
Oh, totally.
So.
Yeah. We try to explain to the younger of our 2 kids that it's nothing personal, that slightly that the ratio isn't that great in that case with only 2. But yeah, you get old and exhausted after a while. So kids, yeah. But of course, kids also cause you sorrow and torment.
No, but what they do, I would argue, and again, this is not something I'm normally fluent at talking about, but it seems to me that your relationship with your kid is very much the relationship, in some ways, that I was talking about me with the universe, right? I believe that there's something outside of myself that matters more than me, that points to, there was a great political moral philosopher. What was his name? I think his name was Cher. I can't remember. My brain is fried. He was at BU, and he had this great line saying, trying to defend hypocrisy, because he was sort of a gummy guy in his personal life, and he said, look, the sign pointing to Boston doesn't have to go there. And what he was pointing about is, we're all flawed, but that doesn't mean we don't know where the right way to go. And I think that insight about right and wrong comes much closer to the fore when you have a kid. One of the expressions in that book, The Tyranny, Clichés, that one of the expressions I hate is whenever I hear politicians say it, Republican or Democrat, is, we need to dedicate ourselves to a cause larger than ourselves. Because whenever I hear politicians say that, what they really mean is we need to dedicate ourselves to some sort of function of government or government program, when in reality, your family is the cause that we are first and foremost dedicated to, that is larger than ourselves. You take a bullet for your family. I take a bullet for my family. We make large and small sacrifices every single day for our children and for our spouses. And I think that we are naturally hardwired to think that way in terms of family. That doesn't mean that it doesn't get informed and cultivated through culture to channel some of those impulses in better and more productive ways, but it's there. And so I spend an enormous amount of time just thinking about my family. And I find whenever I get on a plane, I get, this almost existential angst about why am I on this plane without my family? And what happens to my family if I don't come back?
And what about larger affiliations than the family? I mean, what about tribal affiliation? Is that both of your books kind of identify you with an ideological tribe, I would say. Sure. How much meaning in your life comes from being on one side, on one team in a struggle?
Less than you might think. I like my professional life quite a bit. I like being a writer. I like having the freedom to write about the things that I want to write about. But one of the things that draws me to my ideological tribe, as you put it, is this idea that politics should actually be a very small part of our lives. And one of the things I see about my tribe, or at least my subset, my clan of my tribe, or whatever you want to call it, is that that's the vision we have for this country, is that we shouldn't let politics decide every nook and cranny of our lives and interfere and saturate our lives. And so, yeah, I believe in that stuff very strongly. I've been involved in the conservative movement one way or another since I was I met Pat Buchanan at my bris. I've been around for a while, and I like this cause, and I believe in it passionately, and I'm sort of a happy warrior about it because I really believe I'm on the right side, and I'm on the right side not just Republican versus Democrat stuff. Yeah, I can get caught up in the sports mentality, my team versus your team stuff as much as anybody, maybe more than a lot of normal people because of the nature of what I do for a living. But it really, when I get home from work, I watch one news broadcast, and then the last thing in the world I want to do is watch any more of that stuff.
But what about during an election? Isn't there a special aren't you staying up later then, actually looking at polls and stuff and feeling you really want your side to prevail? And
yeah, sure. Yeah, no, I get caught up. And I'm not going to lie. Of course I get caught up in that stuff. And, I watch the debates partly out of professional obligation, partly out of sort of junkiness, and partly because obviously I care more about politics than a normal person does. You couldn't do my job. I write, 8 syndicated columns a month basically about politics. You can't do that. You can't sustain that burn rate for 15 years unless you actually care about the subject matter. But I'm a big believer in this distinction of, it's sort of a cliche unto itself. It's a very David Brooksian one about, eulogies versus resumes.
Yeah.
And, my brother died a few years ago. My dad died. He was a big influence on me 10 years ago. And I've been to some funerals lately, and there's nothing more depressing to me than going to a funeral and hearing people talk up the guy's or the gal's resume and not tell stories about the kind of person that he was. And so, yeah, and all that stuff matters, and I could put on all that uniform stuff. But, I always tell, the story, particularly to interns and young hires at National Review. Bill Rusher, when he was the publisher of National Review, he always used to say to the new kids, look, politicians will always disappoint you. And the reason why he said that was not to say that politicians are evil or bad, but that they're just politicians. And by the nature of them, they are fallen and flawed human beings whose self-interest is only secondarily to a lot of the principles that the kids at National Reviews certainly get worked up about. It's first to win elections. And I try to keep a lot of politicians at arm's length. I don't like going to lunch with them and meeting with them because part of it is that I don't find a lot of the nitty-gritty stuff that they want to talk about interesting. I don't want to hear their favors. And also, I don't want to like them too much. My attitude is sort of like the research scientist who doesn't want to get too attached to the lab animals, because part of your job is to stick them with needles,
Yeah, and I have to say, I was just reading your piece on the most recent Republican debate this morning, and I did have the sense, whereas with some pundits, you kind of have the sense that everything they write is tactical, and they're trying to promote whichever candidate they've decided they want to win. And I won't mention any names like Jennifer Rubin's in connection with Mark Rubio, for example. But it's been known to happen. I've got to say, I was reading your piece. And it just had I was thinking, I think I can actually trust this analysis. This is actually your view of the way the debate played out. It just read like that. It just felt like that.
Well, thank you. Yeah, and case in point, I am well known for really not liking Donald Trump at all. And I said he had a good night, because he had a good night. It makes me sad, but it's true.
Yeah. So maybe I'll take your word for that you're ironically not very tribal politically. Some people might be surprised to hear that.
Yeah, well, it depends what you mean by tribal. Like if I were advising the next Republican administration, and I'll be honest, I hope there is one, I might have a tribal idea about who to hire and who not to hire and all that kind of stuff. But that's fundamental to the nature of politics. I wouldn't want them to hire a bunch of squishes or a bunch of Democrats and that kind of stuff. But yeah, I don't pick and choose my friends based upon their politics. I just don't get that worked up about all that kind of stuff anymore.
Mm-hmm. So what came after Faith and Family in the Arthur Brooks list?
Oh gosh, Faith, Family, Friends.
Friends. Well, needless to say, we like Friends. That's why we call them Friends. Right. Friends are good. And you've just said that you shouldn't choose them based on ideology. Anything else you want to? Do you hang out a lot with friends, or do you just kind of have them?
Well, we're all my closest friends for the most part are people I made friends with over 20 years ago when I first came to Washington. Mm-hmm. There are some exceptions and some newcomers, but basically it's them, and we're all sort of basic. Most of us are all married guys and gals with kids. And so you know how that is. You end up getting to this place where you have to schedule getting together and hanging out and all that kind of stuff. Mm-hmm. But yeah, no, I have a very good core group of friends that I stay in touch with. I will say, and maybe it's because I'm working on a book that touches on some of this stuff. One of the most interesting things I think is that, contrary to a lot of Marxist sort of twaddle, one of the most corrupting things in life aren't money. It's one of them is friendship, right? If your best friend, of 20 years or something, or one of your best, if Mickey Cows called you and said, "Hey, look, I'm
in prison. I just killed somebody. I want to conceal. Oh no, I'm not in prison, but I just killed somebody, and I don't want to be in prison. So will you lie for me?" I would say, why don't you call Jonah Goldberg? Because he sounds like the kind of guy who would.
Well, we don't have to put it in those stark terms. What if he called you and said, "Hey, look," and let's assume he has a kid, right? And he says, "Hey, look, my kid's having a rough time, but I think you really benefit from an internship working for you. Do you think you can do that?" And you would, let me put it this way. I don't know whether you would say yes or no, but I do know, just from what I know about human nature, I'm fairly certain from what I know about you and about human nature, you would think about it a lot more seriously than if someone tried to bribe you with just some money that you don't need, right?
Well, and on the other side of it, once your child gets to the age where they're looking for a job, and one of my children has passed through that age, you realize, yes, I would probably pull any string available to me at this point. And whereas you would once thought you would never stoop to such a thing.
Yeah, and my only point is that we are. I mean, you wrote a fantastic book about evolutionary psychology. It was one of the first books on the subject I ever read. You know this stuff better than I do, but we are hardwired to treat our friends better than we are strangers.
Yeah,
and there are reasons for it. I don't think it is a pure materialistic, selfish gene kind of thing, but regardless, the emotions are there and they're real, and we need relationships, we need friendships. You can't get new old friends, and they put your life in context in a way that is, I think, very, very important. And whether it gives you meaning or not, it certainly gives you, it gives you satisfaction and happiness in ways that a lot of other things don't.
But you're right. It is prone to corrupting influence. I mean, I've long thought that when you look at people about whom it is said he is the most loyal guy I've ever met, it is often the case that these people are like thuggish creeps. I mean, loyalty beyond a certain point, is not a good thing.
Right. So actually, because I was actually thinking very briefly about this on the drive over to the office. I think, when you first approached me about doing something about the meaning of life, one of the things that came to mind was, there's that great scene in City Slickers where who's the old cowboy guy?
All I remember is Billy Crystal. I don't remember any. I'm not even sure I saw the movie, but go ahead.
The guy who did the push-ups at the Oscars. Anyway, he says, look, you got to
Charles Bronson.
No. Van Rant. It'll come to me.
Oh,
anyway,
no. Anyway,
he says, life comes down to just one thing. And Billy Crystal says, well, what's that one thing? And he says, that's what you've got to figure out. And I think that's horseshit. I think that I'm against one thingism in every sphere of life. I hate. That's one of the reasons I hate Marxism, because it's this monocausal explanation of everything, right?
If you're about to mention Isaiah Berlin, please don't.
I'm not going to do
he's the classic. You don't like hedgehogs.
I'm not going to do the Fox Hedgehog thing. That's fine. Okay. But my only point is that it's a balance. Career is really important, right? Mm-hmm. But it's not everything. Mm-hmm. Family is really important, but it can't be everything, because then you're not going to have a career. You're not going to do all sorts of other things that give you satisfaction. Eventually, you're going to resent your family. Friendships are really important. All these things are really important, but not to sound like Mr. Miyagi, but requires balance. And I think balancing those things and where you sort of set the equalizers on the big board of your life varies from person to person. But you got to have a mix of a lot of the different things.
Mm-hmm. It is true. Now, have we exhausted Arthur Brooks's list of F's, or was there more?
No. There's another one. There's earned success, right?
Earned. What is earned? So, in other words, just meritocratic success, or earned in deeper.
Earned success, and Arthur's a better guy to talk about it than I am. But the reason why he brings it up is because it's not just money. For some people, it's money, right? I mean, Donald Trump, he thinks the measure of his worth and importance in the universe is about the fact that he made billions of dollars and all that, and he talks about it all of the time. I think it's gauche and crude, and he's a low-class person's idea of what a high-class person is like. But it's perfectly fine. If you set out in your life to make $1 million, you make $1 million, you should be very proud of that fact. But if you set out to be a kindergarten teacher and you're a great kindergarten teacher, that's great too. If you set out to be a priest, you're not going to make a lot of money, at least not in the 21st century, maybe in the 12th century. But if you're a great priest and you've helped people and you've enriched people's lives and you made a serious contribution that people recognize as your own, that's earned success. It's the idea of feeling respect and recognition for the hard work and your accomplishments and those distinct skills and capabilities that you bring to bear. If you just win the lottery, there's a reason why people get really depressed 6 months after they won the lottery, because they didn't do anything to earn the money. There's a reason why people's happiness level goes right back down to where it was after they inherit a lot of money, for most people, because they didn't earn the money. But if you actually build a better mousetrap or do something really impressive and are a great businessman and you earn the money, then the money is a barometer of your success. It's not the success itself. And I think that it's a useful thing to think about in terms of crafting public policy, because government can give you money. Government can't give you a sense of earned success. It's a real teach a man to fish versus, give a man a fish kind of point. And that's one of the places where people's happiness comes from. And I think a lot where their meaning comes from too.
But doesn't people's happiness revert to its kind of baseline level even after earned accomplishments? Like you get a promotion, you get the thrill, it subsides. And in fact, isn't that what keeps very ambitious and successful people going, is that the happiness keeps subsiding? I mean, that makes sense as something.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure. But like, let's say you write a great novel when you're 23, and then you don't write another great novel for a very, very long time. Mm-hmm. You still have, it's like a Super Bowl ring. You can't take that away from you, and it gives you a sense of what you've done and what you can accomplish and why you have a sense of being special. And I think everybody in life at least deserves the shot at finding some earned success. Not everybody can be a millionaire, but everyone has a shot and deserves a shot to find some place where they can make a meaningful contribution. I mean, there's a very utopian quote from Bill Clinton about what the mission of the Clinton Global Initiative is, or something like that. I don't know if it still is, but I remember at the time, and he said one of them was that I think there was two things he wanted. He wanted no one should die before their time, and everyone should feel like they've made a meaningful contribution to their society. Mm-hmm. I think as a utopian goal, those are pretty good utopian goals. Mm-hmm. I would not put my faith and my confidence in Bill Clinton to achieve either of those things.
Now, Jonah, don't get tribal.
But I think that's a pretty noble and certainly worthwhile aspiration for a secular organization.
Mm-hmm. Now, Jonah, one of my two dogs just walked in, and I'll try to maybe feature him on camera if, that's one of my dogs. Which leads to the subject of dogs.
Yes.
Talk about what I was just thinking the other day about how much meaning my dogs actually do provide in my life. I mean, seriously, I'm not kidding.
Oh, I'm 110% with you. I agree with you entirely.
What is it about dogs? Why is that you and I might both agree that a cat just couldn't do the same thing for us?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I have a bunch of different theories about dogs. I mean, some of them are. I thought about writing a book about dogs once, but I mean, talk about a crowded marketplace. One, dogs are the only animals that choose to be with humans, right? I mean, not counting parasites in your gut or something, right? They're the only like sophisticated mammals that actively.
Cats choose to be near people and keep them at a distance and be aloof, but it's not the same.
Cats choose places, and they like human places. Mm-hmm. Dogs choose people. There's that old joke about, if you want to figure out whether your wife loves you or who loves you more, your wife or your dog, lock them both in the trunk of your car for 3 hours and then come back and see which one is happy to see you.
I've actually done both those things. I didn't realize I was conducting an experiment.
And so I think that's part. Dogs and humans have made an evolutionary choice to be together, and we're evolved to sort of be able to communicate with each other. And they do these fantastic experiments about how dogs can read human body language in incredibly sophisticated ways that are totally lost on wolves and coyotes and other canines. I mean, they have quite clearly evolved into the ability to communicate with humans, not really on the verbal level. That's the kind of thing that has to be trained on the sort of body language subliminal level. And I think we pick up something from dogs in return for that. But also, it's like, no matter how crappy your day is, no matter how many people are attacking you, no matter how badly you think you might have screwed up something, your dog doesn't give a rat's ass about any of it.
No.
Your dog just wants to be with you. It derives its meaning in the world from being with you. And that has to rub off. And I think it's sort of like like you use the example of our sweet tooth, and why we like sweets.
Right.
Because of evolutionary adaptation about
to fruits,
savanna fruits and all that stuff. I think we have an evolutionary adaptation to want to be in little, small hunter-gatherer bands, and dogs feel like they're arousing a little bit of that in us. And and at the end of the day, it is a wonderful thing to be loved, and dogs love you, and you feel lovable when they love you, and you love them back. I mean, I could go on all day, but I think those are a big part of it.
Yeah, well, we did to some extent co-evolve with dogs. I mean, they evolved under our very intentional selective pressure as we created different breeds and stuff. But it may be that in the beginning, as we entered into that symbiotic relationship with them, some degree of attraction to them. I don't know. Entered the gene pool. But
there's that new book out, Predators, which claims it was the dogs who helped us kill the Cro-Magnons or the Neanderthals or whatever, and I'm not sure she nails the argument, but it's interesting.
It turns out we had a little sex with the Neanderthals, we now know, because their DNA is intermingled with ours, but we killed the ones we didn't have sex with, I guess, yes.
Yeah, which is,
it's the way you do these things. And well, I'm sure they were an asset. I think the idea must be that in the beginning they helped keep predators away at night, and in exchange we gave them scraps of food. I don't know. Yeah,
although one of the insights she has, and I can't remember the lady's name, which I thought was really interesting, is that we're the only primates that you can see that their irises are surrounded by white, and that allows you to communicate with others at great distances. You can tell which way someone wants you to look just with your eyes, and dogs know how to read that.
Do they ever?
And so humans and dogs, or Homo sapiens and dogs, part of her theory is that one of the ways we could beat out the Neanderthals is that the Neanderthals didn't have that bond with dogs. But a lot of it is just huge conjecture, so I don't want to get too deep in the weeds on it.
So we've stayed in one part of the alphabet. We've had family, faith, friends. Then we went to E with earned success, and back to D. So with dogs is D. So let's just stay there.
Okay.
And talk about death.
Okay.
And then
I'm against it.
You're against death. Okay. Well, we're done then. No, but what about this problem of confronting it? I mean, you're not as old as I am. Maybe this isn't it's not a very pressing issue for me, but do you think about that?
Sure. I like a lot of people, I've had some health scare type things, and you think about it, and when my dad died, I certainly thought about it. When my brother died, I certainly thought about it. I was friends with Andrew Breitbart, and he's almost exactly my age, and he died, and you think about it when that happened, and but I try not to let it terrify me, and I don't put all my hopes into the singularity or some other Walt Disney-like head-freezing scheme. But you think about it, and I think one of the things you think about, or I think about more and more, a friend of mine's son recently died, and we had a long talk about it, and, it's this eulogy versus resume thing. I went to the funeral of someone I had worked with for a long time, and it really depressed me that no one really had any stories about him as a good guy. It was all there were stories about him being a character, and there were stories about him doing these impressive things. But there's a reason why so many peoples of the world, do ancestor worship and all that kind of stuff. I mean, how you're remembered by your family and by your friends, I think matters, and I think about that stuff a lot. But I just don't have any great answers for it. So it's it's the difference between problems and facts, right? Problems are solvable, facts aren't.
Yeah. I just went to a few months ago a funeral of a friend my age who died here in Princeton, and his name's Merrill Noden. He was a sports writer. He had also been a track star. And it was the testament was just so rich and compelling. It was and the turnout. Of course, part of it is if you kind of stay in one area your whole life, you have a better chance for people showing up. But it was just the turnout and the diversity of people, And it was weird. I had known him fairly well, but it never put it together. I had a whole new appreciation of him when I heard, different perspectives on his life. And it's just amazing how I just came away convinced his life had really added up to something in a way I would not have appreciated.
Yeah.
I think it's safe to say I'm not going to have that kind of turnout at my funeral. Will you go to my funeral, Jonah?
Will it be in Washington or in Princeton?
Wherever you say. If I can get somebody of your stature to show up, I will have it, in Antarctica. Whatever you say.
I'll be there, man.
Okay.
When you say my stature, you mean someone as tall as I am, right? I mean, that's what
No, I mean someone who's written a mega best-selling book.
Uh-huh.
Nothing less will do.
Okay.
Well, we've covered the big ones then. I mean, the thing about death is you would like to think that you will be able to approach it with equanimity. And generally speaking, the trend in your life suggests as much because you do get better as you get older at handling certain things with equanimity, and you care a little less about yourself and a little less about what people think about you and so on. And yet, when you see how fiercely basically everyone struggles against the inevitable, right? I mean, people, they get into conditions that you would think would just be intolerable, that you would rather be dead than endure. And they endure them every day, and you just realize you're never going to feel great about the prospect of death.
Yeah, no, and having now had my own dad died and knowing so many other people who have lost parents, at the end of the day, it's a crappy thing no matter what. And, and dying suddenly has got good aspects and bad aspects, and dying a slow, lingering death actually has obvious bad aspects, but also good aspects. I mean, my dad died over the course of months in a hospital, and it was terrible, but I also got to have a lot of conversations with him. Mm-hmm. And I have friends whose dads died, at a ripe old age, but from a sudden heart attack and disappeared, and they never got to have any of those last conversations. And I think that, you can talk it around and you can talk it square. At the end of the day, it always just simply sucks. Yeah.
I think we can agree on that. And perhaps close on that inspiring note. So thank you for taking the time. I guess we'll get back to your current mission in life. You said you're working on a book?
I am.
And what did you tell us what the book is on?
No, I didn't.
And it's a secret?
It is basically a secret.
We know it's not about dogs because you said you're not doing a book about dogs.
That is right. Although there'll be some dogs in there.
There will be dogs.
Yeah, and the word liberal will not appear in the title or a subtitle.
Really? You're going to write a non-liberal bashing book?
Yeah, pretty much.
Oh, good luck with that. I'm not optimistic, Jonah.
Yeah, well, you got to do what you got to do.
Pretty tough to change your brand at your stage in life, but we'll see. Okay, well, good luck with that, and thank you so much for sharing, as we say, as liberals say. As liberals say when mouthing one of their cliches, thank you for sharing.
Sure, no, happy to.
Okay.
Thanks for having me.
Okay, take care.